Right, so since these functions are being called via an API connector in Azure, how do we actually debug them? Well, one way around it is to introduce a reverse proxy, but that does mean opening a port and using port forwarding on your router. So let's see how we go about doing that. So the first thing we're going to need is a reverse proxy function. So I'm just going to go ahead and paste that in here. And what this does, it just basically is a pass-through function. So you supply a parameter of the name, which in our case will be policy, and the code we'll talk about later, that's for securing the actual function, but we won't go into that just yet. And what that's going to do, that's going to basically call this function here from wherever it's sitting. So we need to set up a variable in our JSON settings called proxy host, and that's actually going to call our local host while we're debugging locally, just while we're testing this reverse proxy function. And the port needs to be the port that this application is running on locally. So if we just run that a second, I'm just going to copy that URL there. I'm going to open up a new browser. Let's paste that. And then I'm just going to give it the parameter name equals policy. Okay, so let's go back and put a couple of breakpoints on that and run it again. So I'm going to put a breakpoint here and then a breakpoint here. So if you run that again, it's going to hit our reverse proxy. It's going to pull in the name, which we want policy, which is this function here. It's then going to wrap up a URL, and it's actually going to go and call this function now, and then return whatever value this returns. You see there, and then write it back to the application. Okay, so first of all, what we want to do is we want to publish this up to Azure. So let's just go ahead and do that quickly. Okay, so that's finished publishing. The next thing we need to do is we need to open up another browser tab, and we need to go to what's my IP. Okay, so just click on that and find your public IP. So I'm actually using a VPN, so this isn't my actual public IP address, but just make a note of what your public IP address is. Okay, so the next step is you need to go to your router. You need to set up a new port forwarding rule. First, find the IP address of the machine that you're working on, your development machine, and that's quite easy to do. Just run a command, type in IP config, and it will be your IP4 address, this one here. Okay, so just add that. Then you want to open up an external port. I'm using all the 8s, and then your internal port will be the port that your application is running on, your connector application is running on, and in this case it's 703. So that's it for your router. Right, the next step after that is to go to your app service that contains your Azure function, your connector function, and go to configuration. We need to add a new application setting. Now this application setting is the Azure version of our proxy host. So we need to take that there and call it proxy host. And the address that we need to use, I'm not sure it's going to be HTTP, I think it's going to be HTTP. Okay, the IP address, your external IP address that you took note of earlier, and then that external port number, this one here. So 8888. So locally we're using localhost and that port number, but for externally from Azure we'll be calling the actual proxy host will be this. So what happens here? This will make a call to your router on this port, and that will then forward it to your local port running your application. Okay, so you want to save that. Okay. Now, let's see if that actually works. I want to go back here. I want to go to API connector, edit it, and I want to call that, what's the name of the function? The name of the function is RP for reverse proxy. So it's going to be RP, and the parameter is going to be policy. So let's see if this works. Okay, so we have this application running, and we have a breakpoint on here, so it should hit this at some point unless I'm doing something wrong. So let's see now. So let's go back to here, and let's run this. Okay, and we need to log out. Let's sign out. Let's sign in. No, what's gone wrong there? Okay, so I found out what the problem was. I added a HTTP in front of this. You don't need that. Okay, that is it. Okay, so it should all work fine now. Okay. So let's go back to our, so this is running now, so let's go back to our sign in. Okay, our main application, sorry, let's run. Okay, fine. I need to sign out, to sign back in again, and now it hits our policy. So it runs through this on the server in Azure, and Azure then forwards it on to your local set via your port forwarding rule. Okay. And that returns the claim again. There we go. Okay, so I hope that's been helpful. In the next video, I think I'm going to do, rather than returning a single policy, I think I'll do returning a bunch of roles, where I'll be talking to Graph API, or maybe even a database, but I think I'll be using Graph API. And then in here, I'll be using some transformation functionality in order to get those in as roles rather than policies. Okay. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. Bye bye now.